Thank you, Lascan Corla. I could pick up on the last comment and spend the next 20 minutes very easily answering how did we get here. Because it was very obvious to me as Minister for Energy, as some of the officials here will know, and will know from the quite heated discussions I had both within the Department of Energy and within Cabinet, that this lack of management of energy demand on the grid was going to create a very significant problem for us. And I flagged this back in 2017 when it became very obvious to me what was going on. So this should not come as a surprise to anyone whatsoever. And in fact, back at that stage, when we were designing the new Renewable Electricity Support Scheme, we specifically included in the new scheme a specific windfall tax for renewable energy providers, where they would end up in a scenario like they're in today. So any of the operators that are now producing electricity under the Renewable Electricity Support Scheme that I designed as Minister have a clawback built into it. The difficulty is that my predecessors, including Minister Ryan, who designed the previous scheme, did not put that clawback in place, and that's the reason, in part, that we're in the situation that we're in today. Another part of that reason that we're in the situation we're in today is that we decommissioned some of this 450 megawatt of a deficit that we have today, and the impression has been given that we're decommissioning old kit. That wasn't the case. In fact, if you look at the two power plants in both Lanesborough and Shannonbridge, both of those plants had a 10-year lifespan left in them. And I said here on the floor of the House, back in December of 2020, when I questioned the Taoiseach on the closure of the two power plants in Lanesborough and Shannonbridge, I pointed out at that time that Kieran Mulvey, the government's own Just Transition Commissioner, had described the two plants as being in a pristine state. And that's why I, as Minister for Energy, took the decision that we would transition these plants away from burning peat to burning indigenously sourced biomass. Not only would it ensure that security of supply in relation to energy, it would have provided a fair transition from peat to domestically sourced biomass, and provide farmers right across the Midland counties who are struggling in terms of making an income from beef production to move away from beef production into a biomass production where there was a guaranteed contracted price available to them, creating local Indigenous jobs, supporting local Indigenous employment, providing a sustainable income for local farmers. But that didn't happen, and some of the people who are wringing their hands today were the very ones that were giving rounds of applause going on to the local radio stations and onto the national television, saying this was a great thing that we're closing down these power plants at the time. The closure of those plants led to an effective wasting of €176 million of electricity customers' money, because that money had already been paid for those two power plants that had a 10-year lifespan left in them. And we're being asked, electricity customers are being asked again today to put their hand into the pocket to pay for the mistakes in relation to the decisions that were made. And, you know, it is frustrating to think that not only are electricity customers paying for it, we now have the perverse situation that we're now suspending our environmental laws in this country so that we can facilitate the commissioning of diesel generators to replace what would have been these two biomass plants in Lanesborough and Shannonbridge. And we're asking, on top of the 176 million euro in lost payments that are already paid to the ESB for these plants. We're asking every single family in this country to pay an extra 40 euro for the replacement 450 megawatts that now have to be provided as a result of this legislation. A point that I made back in December 2020, that we would be forcing electricity customers to pay for the replacement of the power plants in Lanesborough and Shannonbridge, as well as pay for the decommissioning of those particular plants. And while I'm on the issue of customers paying, the one way that people can try to avoid these additional costs in relation to electricity is to retrofit their homes. Now, we know what has gone on in relation to the warmer home scheme for people who are in fuel poverty, and if I have time I will come back to that at the end. But I want, Minister, for a second to turn to the Better Energy Warmer Home scheme for people that were accessing the grant for the new retrofit scheme. And as you know, this is something that's close to my own heart. I piloted the deep retrofit scheme as Minister and wanted to see it mainstreamed. And as soon as the application process opened up, I applied myself for the retrofit scheme, for my own house, which is an old house. And went through the process in relation to it, and the agent through the one-stop shop that I was working with said to me, there's now a condition: you have to have a home energy assessment carried out before you make any decisions. You have to pay up front for that home energy assessment, which I did. I paid up front for it, and they came back with the cost of carrying out the work and the amount of grant aid I would get. So I decided to go ahead with the project. The SEAI approved, that home energy assessment was completed in August of last year. The SEAI approved one-stop shop contractor then, got each of their agents to come in, do the pricing in relation to it, and on the first week in November I got the final price back from them with the contract to start the work. Between August and November the cost had gone up by 33%, and the cost to me as the homeowner had gone up by 53%. Now the reality is, Minister, that the home energy assessment is nothing but a three-card trick that you're extorting additional taxation out of people to carry out a home energy assessment which is not worth the paper it's written on. Now, in fact, in my case and in many other cases, what it did was it actually discouraged people and postponed people carrying out works on their home that would have actually reduced their energy costs last winter, because they went through this farcical process. And this is a practical example of what is happening right across the country at the moment. And if you look at the figures, Minister, because from talking to people that I have encouraged to go and go through this process, they have come up against the exact same problems. That figures, once you engage with a contractor approved and authorised by the SEAI, having gone through the home energy assessment, the final figures have absolutely nothing to do with the figures in relation to the home energy assessment. So if you want to get people to take up this particular scheme, then you need to go back and look at the basic mathematics in relation to it, no more than the point I'm making to you in terms of forcing electricity customers across this country that are struggling to pay their electricity bills to pay for the mistakes and pay for the additional electricity that is being put in to large energy users across this country. It's immoral, it's wrong, and it shouldn't happen. Thank you.